Hi, welcome to our latest edition of Raw Agility. My name is John Riley. I am a Scrum.org professional Scrum trainer and principal Agile coach and trainer for Ready Set Agile. Today, we're going to talk about our customer. Do you even know who your customer and stakeholders are, and how do you engage to get the proper feedback? We'll also be touching on topics that you should include in your sprint review and how to make it a working session instead of just a demo. And we're also going to be touching on some data points that are important for you to drive results and outcomes.
Fantastic. I'm Brian Link. I am an enterprise agile coach with Practical Agilist. And we're also going to talk about a few things related to how teams take advantage of that data and actually create relative estimates and why they use them in the first place and how they navigate through all of the definition of ready, definition of done, and maybe even think about how they look at their own maturity. How do they improve? Do they have a culture of continuous improvement? How do you even know that you're making progress as an agile team? I think we can get right into some questions, John.
Yeah, let's just do it.
One of the first questions that we hear a lot is about, are you even talking to customers? If agile is so customer centric, what are you seeing at that team level? Are people even talking to customers?
Yeah, it's good you mentioned this, Brian. I struggle with this a lot. Like you said, it's very customer focused. Even with the teams, the teams are hired for a certain skill. They know they're there for a certain skill, and for example, they're there to solve the problem, or to enforce quality for any kind of product development. So a lot of times, all we know is we just know the task at hand. What's the task and what problem
The
do you want me to
work.
solve?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, but there's a bigger picture here. There's an outward facing thing that we need to know about, and that is the customer. And the customer doesn't have to be a customer of the company. Your customer could be your manager. It could be any stakeholder.
An end
So
user, if you will.
the user, right? Even if it comes to support tasks, right? I don't know. I mean that's kind of where I see it is, do you talk to the customer? Do you even know who the customer is?
Do you even know who they are? Is such an awesome question. I had the privilege once of working for a company that didn't even build a feature unless they had a customer identified who wanted to buy the product because of the feature. And they made it like an active customer development program. Some companies are just afraid to even show incomplete work to customers. Like it's like the sacred thing. Like they have to show only completed work to people. Wait till it's published.
Yeah, and that's the struggle in teams too, is it goes until completion. But now, I mean, you've intrigued me. So this customer facing program you just described, how did that go?
So it was amazing. So it was Chef software. Everyone knew about the DevOps related functionality that we were building, and they were adamant about this idea of being efficient with the way they did their work, so that they could actually get a partnership with named clients. And they had some long-standing ones that were just big advocates for the product, maybe even requested certain features. And when the product owners and product managers would say, this is the next thing we're going to work on, they'd reach out to the customers that requested it in the first place to say, do you want to be an active customer partner as part of this product feature we're building? And they would meet every 2 weeks, just like it was an informal sprint review, to show the work, get some feedback, have a conversation about it, make sure it was something they would use. So many places we see these days don't actually pay attention to that feedback loop, and they're building stuff that people don't use.
See what I like about that. And so, well, before I go into that, so it was actually, if I'm understanding you correctly, it was actually very successful from the
Yeah, hugely
organization
successful.
standpoint, produced a lot of value.
And it was, I think it was in their culture. It was part of their lifeblood. Like that was how they worked. They said, we build things for customers, and they made that the way that they operated. I implemented a same program right here in town with one of our clients in Columbus. And Same exact thing. We ran sort of like traditional design thinking exercises, asked them to accomplish a task and didn't tell them how to do it, and to just watch, observe the client interacting with the product, see if they can't figure out how to download the PDF or whatever, and see where they struggle. Watch their mouse, watch their eyes, pay attention to the words they say. Just traditional UX research is something that's feels like still a hard skill set to find these days.
Traditional UX, and you're talking about user experience, which is so very important in any kind of an agile environment. So you're actually looking for how the customer behaves with something that you have never created before, and letting them see it for the first time with their own eyes and being
That's
able to
right. And
experience to
seeing,
touch it.
yeah, is it usable?
Right.
Is it something they can intuitively understand? Like, we take for granted that you can just pick up any iPhone app and know how to use it. But like, the world didn't used to be that way.
Right. Right.
It's still
From
hard to do.
well, it's very hard to do in many respects. I mean, from the team perspective, that's very important, because now what you've done in those companies where that's part of their culture is now you're putting you're putting an actual person in the picture. The fact that, okay, now I'm doing something for someone that really thinks that this is going to be valuable.
Yeah.
And it's an end user. Having an end user on an agile team, I've had the same experience where having the end user actually sit with the team and know firsthand how things are going
Oh,
it is
it's
wonderful.
unbelievable.
Right. And that's the thing, is that with a team member, that they're going to take it to a level of completion that they think is going to be correct. So a lot of times for software developers, I've been a software developer for many years, you have a certain level of completion, and I don't want anyone else to see it until it reaches that level.
Yeah.
Well, here's the problem with that mindset, is that, well, where's the value, right? The value is not with what you're thinking. The value is what
Well,
your
it's the
customer is
assumptions you're
experiencing.
making.
It's the assumptions we're making. Exactly correct. Right. So it's very important to know that a customer is going to say, yeah, that's what I'm looking for. So then that you can bring to a sprint review, for example, to then show it off and get other people's feedback, because again, it might be just this one person's
Yeah.
assumption, but
No,
you're
I
getting
love
more.
that.
And that's where the value is, right?
It
So
really is. And the just to touch on the anti-pattern for a minute, just because I think a lot of people are seeing this challenge out there. Too many people, especially in like leadership levels, organizational, like, we know our customer and they play customer proxy roles, and they're guessing, they're making assumptions, and they might as well be doing a big dumb waterfall project and waiting 12 months before they show a real customer, because it might fall flat on its face.
right. Well, let's touch on that a little bit. So, we talked about the organization level being able to engage with the customers. We're talking about the team being able to engage with the customers. Now let's talk about that coaching role, that agile coach, or that scrum master role. I actually recently saw a post on LinkedIn where they reach out to experts, and they were saying that, well, it's the scrum master's job to reach out to those stakeholders
Okay.
and be able to make them talk. What's your take on that?
So I love that question. I think um the roles and the hats that we wear on teams are always better when they're blended a little bit, right? Now that's a very generic statement to make, but it means that if you have a question, like, there's no reason, just even an average team member, you have a question about the product and maybe your end user is an internal employee, go flip and talk to them. There's no reason why you shouldn't just have a conversation to validate an assumption while you're literally in the middle of coding something. There's no rule in Agile that says you can't do that. Now, I like this idea the internet talks about, well, whose job is it to do to make sure that it doesn't slip through the cracks, right? I think product owners tend to have the largest level of ownership in terms of relationships with stakeholders, collecting requirements, understanding feedback, prioritizing what really matters through the business lens. And so that's why that matters, is that all feedback is good, but ultimately your connection to the business, your liaison to the business, the product owner has to be the one to decide what's most important in order for us to stay on our right path and build the right thing to satisfy our customers, to truly delight our customers.
Yeah, I agree. Just to kind of enhance what you said, um, I think that a product owner can reach out to a scrum master and say, "Hey, this is a list of our stakeholders that we need to engage for a sprint review. Can you do me a favor and arrange an introduction
Of
for
course.
us?"
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yeah.
awesome. That I believe that is, that's part of how a scrum master makes things transparent. That is one of their biggest jobs, is to make things transparent, and just to say, hey, we got this product out here.
Yep.
You've been identified as a stakeholder, and we'd love to have your feedback. Just even that little blurb to say,
I
like you were
do.
saying,
I
go
agree
talk to
with
them.
that.
Right?
And that also gives the scrum master a little bit of an advantage in terms of learning how to better navigate the organization. They're always going to have to help solve some sort of a problem, some sort of a blocker. The scrum master to me is like on the edge of the team, helping the team whenever they need to, but interjecting and going to solve any kind of obstacles that might come up through navigating the organization, understanding the politics, knowing who the players are, having relationships with them.
Right. And on a team, that's so important too, to know that, yeah, guess what? You're building something that's very important. And here you got a bunch of stakeholders here, people who are really interested in what you're doing. I actually kind of struggle a little bit with team members being able to present something at a sprint review, or being able to say, we had a lot of problems here. But just by saying we had some problems with this, oh, well, we couldn't get the Docker instance to deploy correctly because of this and that or the other thing. It's like, okay, well, I don't understand what you just said, but I see that you're struggling with it, and you're actually, I respect the fact that you're taking the time to work on my product. So all right, I get it. I thought it was a simple thing. You're telling me it's not, and that's important to me as a
Yeah,
stakeholder.
and the
So
transparency, right? I mean,
right,
that's one of the greatest things about Agile. The sprint review is a moment of transparency. Let's celebrate the things we accomplished, but let's also talk a little bit about what you need and what we thought we were doing next, and make sure those things align.
yeah, that's good. Yeah, so customer engagement obviously important. There's I've actually been working with some teams now who are trying to decide, like, what do we put in the sprint review. And of course, you and I both know it's not just a demo. It can be, but
Yeah,
a demo
yeah.
is just really a small part of it. Going back to what you said about transparency, right? And presenting, I actually had a product owner come to me last week and say, what data should we present, right?
Mm.
And I've actually, with certain teams, some data is important, some data is not. Like, I've tried to get away from burn down charts because I think that they're actually, okay, I'll just be completely transparent, I think they're worthless. They don't tell anything.
They make people think of it like a project plan.
Right. Yeah, and that's the problem. So talk a little bit about some data that you've used that obviously it depends on the team, it depends on the product, that kind of thing, but
Well, and
do
there's
you have a
internal
story
and
with that?
external uses. There, yeah, it's an awesome question. So, like, what data helps drive a team and make them productive? Not just at a sprint review, I assume, right? Like,
Yeah, I just use the sprint
where
review
are
as
they
an
using
example.
data and for what purposes on the team? What kinds of things should a team be paying attention to as sort of metrics and measures? I think there's a really important thing that every team should be looking at in terms of impressing upon leadership and stakeholders that they've mastered their flow. They need to be predictable. So many times we see leaders getting frustrated. This agile stuff isn't working. How do I know that you're actually being productive? Like, is your velocity going up? Like, no, that's the wrong thing. If your velocity is steady, then all of a sudden you are predictable, and they can show up to the sprint review and you can say, hey, we said we're going to do 27 points worth of work this week. We did 25, but let me explain why it was so valuable and how we're going to go forward. And they have this idea of building trust one sprint review at a time. And so inside, in order to help manage that and stay focused, I usually recommend a team look at their cumulative flow diagram, see what actually got stuck, how much were they trying to take on too much work during the sprint? How do we know that they're actually iterating on bite-sized chunks of work to deliver value iteratively. That's one of the most powerful things a team can do.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up the cumulative flow diagram. I say CFD just because I can't pronounce cumulative flow diagram correctly, but a CFD will tell you a load of information. I actually had someone this week come to me yesterday from a medical insurance company here locally in Columbus, and she said, how should we be tracking hours in Jira? And I'm like, oh wow. So I'm trying to bite my tongue here, and
Yep.
I've got several alarms going off here. Um,
You didn't
but
pounce on her, but hopefully you educated her gently.
well, it kind of goes on what you were saying about a CFD. Okay, so what a cumulative flow diagram, not only does it tell you, like, where you're spending a lot of time in your tasks, your stories, or whatever you happen to be tracking in your workflow, but it's also telling you, oh, are we spending a lot of time testing, or are we spending a lot of time in this dev work, or we're spending a lot of time in support, or whatever our flow is going to be. But it also makes your flow transparent. It's like, oh, okay, these are the kind of the phase gates we go to get to done, ultimately what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's showing a definition of done. So really, that question around Jira that I was talking about, that's just a tool. So Jira is just a tool, and it goes into like, okay, well, what's your process, right? And that's what a CFD is going to show you. Is it's going to show you your process. But still, we're getting a little deeper. We're not getting the agile mindset. It's more about what is the principle behind, or actually, what's the practice? What's the practice behind that tool? Why is it? What's the purpose behind using Jira to track our hours, right? And gets deeper and deeper into principles, and down to your values and your mindset, right? And so a lot of this is going into where I get a lot of questions about from the team is like, why are we even tracking our hours? Why does it matter? And it's touching on a value that you and I, it's funny we talk about value versus values, but I'm talking about a value from the company perspective, something you can't touch, of being cost driven, right? And so that's where these metrics come in. Is it because we're trying to minimize cost, or is it because we're trying to maximize value? That is a very big phrase that I struggle with companies trying to identify. Well, what are we trying to do? Cut costs or produce value?
And you know what, John, that kind of hits the nail on the head about organizations kind of using maybe an older mindset about quarterly, annual processes, especially around finance and all those annual kind of cycles, and trying to then transition into an agile mindset, which that it kind of takes a while for that stuff to catch up. And so we have leaders and organizations still nickel and diming and counting the pennies of the hours the teams are spending and scrutinizing that, instead of just taking a step back and going, well, do I still need this team to exist this year? Yeah. So stop worrying about exactly how many hours they're spending and focus on the outcomes they're producing. How do we get them to shift that mindset? And it's like the value you're producing should be more important than the time it takes to get there. And that's a really tough thing for people to get their head wrapped around.
Well, let's go into that a little bit, because I actually worked with a team member who was on this team it was a product team. There was a new product development team. And this guy was on the team. They're doing a migration. Okay. So they're doing a product migration into a newer technology. And this guy was on the team because he had all the business knowledge, but he was also responsible for the support of the existing product. And so what he was doing was he was actually logging all of his time into like a support ticket, which was seen as like an operating expense.
Yeah.
So the question that you asked was, as a leader, is this team still important? Yes, they are. Well, from a team perspective, someone is thinking, well, am I important? Right? I'm logging this support ticket, and this is like seen as an expense.
Mm,
So how would a leader then say, how do they answer that question? Yeah, this team is important, and that guy is important because
right.
he's got the business knowledge. Talk about the transparency around that.
Yeah, yeah. So the leaders need to help reinforce these messages that say, look, you guys are important to us as a team. You have purpose. There's a vision. It's connected to our greater purpose as a company, and therefore you guys exist because you whatever serve a certain customer segment or solve a certain problem for our space as a company. Those things matter, and they should be measurable from big language organizational things like an OKR to say, this is important to us. We're trying to sell more books in Canada this quarter or whatever it might be. And you guys are building the e-commerce pipeline that focuses on that and solves the Canadian tax problems or whatever. And therefore you have purpose. And so if they can focus on that, that's a value orientation. That's a business metric mindset. All of a sudden we can stop paying attention to the counting of hours, and then the people feel less like they have to justify their existence. They feel less like a cog in the machine, and they know why they exist. And you know what happens when people like their job and know why they exist and how they actually serve a specific customer? They do better work.
So
They're more
then,
proud of it.
in your experience, then, how would you suggest that a business leader approach a team and make it transparent to them that yes, you are important? Would you go
Yeah.
to the scrum master? Would you go to the product owner? Would you
I
actually
mean,
go to a team member? I
I
mean,
encourage those business leaders to show up just like the average stakeholder at a sprint review. And I might, behind the scenes as a coach, whisper in their ear and say, if you got a story to tell about something powerful that happened to a customer that's really happy lately, the things that you might be talking about in your executive boardroom that are really important to the company, like if there's anything to do with what this team is doing about that stuff, let's share those things. Let's make them feel that what they're doing is valuable. Tell a real story that has relevance.
so what you're saying, going back to some topics that we had talked about, show up to a sprint review and have a segment within your sprint review as a team to, hey, let's tell some stories about
Yeah.
some customer successes or,
Yep.
or
Yep.
whatever.
So, John, is there an official agenda for a sprint review? Does anyone you have to follow it to the letter? No, right? It's like,
That's a really good question. Actually, there's a team I'm working with now who I've worked with for about a year now, and the Scrum Master has now gotten the courage to actually start off the sprint review by just we take it's a 5-minute time box to just say, okay, what should the sprint review, what should we do in the sprint review
with the team as
with
prep
the
in
team
advance?
and the stakeholders?
Nice. Oh, great.
Yeah, and this is actually a
What
very
do you guys want to
large.
hear?
Yeah, it's a very large sprint review too, and it's very well attended
Mm,
because it is very engaging. And it's gotten to the point where we haven't gotten to the point where we've talked about successes. I really love that. I might suggest that to the Scrum Master. Uh, but we've gotten to the point where uh, team members who didn't previously want to talk about some struggles are now
mm,
saying, hey, I'd really like to talk about this support thing when we did this last release. It's like,
mhm.
oh, okay. And Stickler is like, oh, we had a problem with the release. I didn't know that. It's like,
Yeah.
they just see it black and white. It happened or it didn't.
Yeah.
So that just having a stakeholder say, yeah, this is important. And, going back to your question about the agenda, it doesn't have a set agenda. And sometimes you can talk about the project plan. Sometimes you don't have to. There's times when you can talk about the budget. There's times when you don't have to. Some people might think that that's important. People might not think it's important. You'd be surprised at how many people think that the budget is actually important. How much money are we burning? How much is going out, or how much are we making? Uh, that's some important, transparent information that people would want to know.
Yeah.
And that's really what's saying, hey, okay, yeah, we're burning a lot of money, but look at this person right here is getting a lot of value. Hey, by the way, stakeholder, can you give us a review somewhere to share your experience with this
Yep.
product?
John, I love all that. I think the sprint review is one of the most underutilized tools in an agile team because of its connection to the rest of the organization. The leaders are showing up to get a glimpse into the team. And if you don't tell them about the ugly warts and the problems with the system and the things that you need to be different in order to be more productive, if you don't ask for those things, you might never get them. And it'll be same old, same old. And so, there's a thing that we use all the time, sort of like a coaching leadership, about teaching systems thinking, which is really hard to do because it's a complex mindset. You have to have great awareness, but there's a simple thing to learn first, and that's double loop learning, right? The team is constantly worrying about, solve a problem, fix it, write the code, do the bug, release the product, all this sort of single loop learning, right? Outside of that, though, kind of the fringe of the team and beyond, there's a system that they have to play within. There's a support ticket process. There's a expense budgeting process. There's some vice president approval for whatever. I think there's this idea to get people to really ask for the things that need to be different in order for them to actually get change inside of a company. So how do you know you're being effective? It's through measuring these things and asking leaders for results.
Right. And results and outcomes, right? So we're talking at the sprint review, we're talking about outcomes. See, it's these outcomes that are going to be important to make decisions on what we should do for the next sprint. For example, if we're using Scrum, right? I mean, if we're not using Scrum, then iteration, whatever it is. But it's all about this working session that this sprint review is. It's a working session. It's about being able to come up with, as a group, stakeholders and team, to say, all right, well, what's coming next? This is where the value is, because we might think that migrating new data or migrating the old data is going to be on the lower priority, when a customer will come to a sprint review and say, this is great, but it's not real data. I want to see some real data next time. Mm-hmm. That just speaks volumes. So that's part of what the working session value is going to deliver.
Yeah. I love that. There's one other thing that comes to mind just while you're saying that. As a coach or a scrum master, I'll sometimes ask a team, it's sort of a prep meeting before the sprint review, what do you guys want to show today? And, I think you mentioned this earlier. It's like deciding how you're going to present, or who's going to have the floor and explain the new features that were launched, or the challenges they had with the release or whatever. Like, the conversation needs to have a flow. But sometimes our team members are like, this is too technical to show anyone. And so no one ever hears about it. And so sometimes these behind the scenes things that teams are doing get zero visibility. And I have this sort of like, I was a technologist for many, many years. So I have a soft spot in my heart for like wanting these technical people to get a little bit of spotlight. Be like, and so I've been sneaky in the past, and I've had those most technical team members. Well, I built an API, it moves money, but like, they don't know how to say that in a way that's customer terms. They're like, I built the interfaces to the existing mainframe, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no, let's actually show it. And so like they pull up like a log that's scrolling the results, and no one can tell what the heck it is, but he can say, look, what's happening here, what you're seeing here are the actual outputs of a brand new API that is our brand new infrastructure for how we're going to move money for all of our customers at the bank. All of a sudden, That's like, wow, I didn't know you're building a new infrastructure for money movement at the bank. And yeah, this is the first time it's been working. And now you're seeing it for the first time.
Yeah. And what's nice about that is, like, for example, just putting it in the customer's words or the stakeholders' words, or their, whatever they're trying to hear, where it's like, okay, well, this is an actual first time look at the partnership. This is the partnership that you created with this company to be able to interface with this API. And there you go. It's working.
Right. Hey. Yeah. Otherwise, they might have said, I just built the MM2 API plug set 1. You're like, what?
Yeah, right. Oh, the discombobulator. Right. Yeah, I got it.
What does that mean? Tell me.
Right. Yeah. So that's it's important to be able to put that in the right language. Everyone speaks a different language at
Yep.
sprint reviews. So that's actually a good topic for Scrum Masters to be able to speak many languages and be able to explain from a technology point of view. Well, this is what the outcome is
Yeah.
of our partnership here right now.
John, I used to put on my resume that I was a universal translator.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish that would get some more leverage within
Oh,
the.
and it's a skill set that everyone needs to have. Can you speak business? And do you really pay attention to your audience? And that's such a subtle thing. Like as an agile coach, one of the things that we should always be doing is what I call the art of noticing, right? And it's simple things. It's the body language, it's who's there, who's paying attention to actually make sure you're serving that audience well. And that's so true in a sprint review. Like, oh, I know somebody's here. I know they're concerned about something. Let's make sure we actually mention it.
So you're saying that this is a really good quality for an agile coach or a scrum master to have is to know the nonverbal communication that's going on within a room.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, and paying attention to sort of the political lens, the interpersonal lenses. There's all kinds of dynamics between people. You might remember that this one executive has a bad relationship with this other executive, but you happen to know that they both care about the same feature that you built this sprint. All of a sudden, that's an awesome thing to bring up, right? And have that conversation.
Yeah, you say bring up. I mean, what I said was, one of the jobs of the scrum master is to make sure that things are transparent. I would say that that's actually an art form in itself, being able to know how to make things transparent, and you be non-judgmental about it. That's another important part for a scrum master to have, or even an agile coach, like just like you were mentioning. Uh, just using a sprint review as our example.
Yeah.
Something like, oh, I noticed that there's several members of finance here at our sprint review.
Yep.
Put it right there.
Yeah, just
Just
out there.
that's subtle. Make it that
Yep.
subtle, right? I mean, that's a little direct, right? But there's other approaches that you can do as a scrum master, and knowing when and where to make things transparent.
I love that. And what you'll often see is that the product owner and the scrum master develop a relationship where they're finishing each other's sentences. And like just the fact that the scrum master said that, the product owner will pick up on it and make sure that they talk a little bit more about that particular financial lens or whatever, just to make sure that it gets covered.
Right.
That's a really subtle thing that you don't learn maybe as a brand new team. Scrum is hard getting started. How do you actually get a team to the point where they can start learning some of these more advanced lessons? I think there's a lot to talk about there in terms of helping teams sort of digest the mindset and where like we say it clicks, right? It takes a little while for a team to get there.
Oh, definitely. It takes a while for a team to get there, individuals on the team, several teams in a scaling situation, and even the organization. You talked about one of those advanced topics. I'd like to kind of switch to another thing that
sure.
is actually on my mind since you brought it up about it's not really an advanced topic, but it seems to be an advanced topic in the mind, and that is the topic of relative estimation.
Okay.
So, you and I both train teams to use relative terms when it comes to estimating. Instead of like absolute time. Okay, well that task that's going to take me 8 hours. Okay, well
the hours conversation. Where do I put my hours in Jira? No,
yeah,
that's not
right, exactly, right. It's like that just sets off a bunch of alarms for us and triggers. But other people don't understand that because that's the way they've been working for years, right? And that's how they've been using their that's how they've been using their language to for in their day-to-day jobs. So what do we mean by relative estimation? I mean, how do you explain that to someone, and why use relative estimation?
And why is the right question, John? It's like, too many times people get sort of mechanical and they think like Agile is just a new set of rules and we should just take our old project plan, slice it into user stories and stick it in Jira and put hours on them. And if you're doing that, I'm here to tell you you're doing it wrong, right? So why do you do relative estimating? And it's this idea of humans kind of suck at estimating, right? It's like you look at a project plan, line 187, 9 months from now is a 4-week long task, what's the probability of that actually getting done in 4 weeks? It's almost zero, right? It's dead wrong. We know it's chock full of lies. And so Agile tries to change that by turning it into hey, there's something we're going to do soon. And so we better make sure we understand it. But like, how do we make sure it's not too big, or if it makes enough sense, we actually understand it well? And so the conversation around estimating is actually more about the conversation than it is the estimating, first of all. But what it does is it helps us make sure that the team, looking at user stories that hopefully are written in customer outcome orientation, that are about the why and not so much the how. At some point, the team has to do that tech design in their head. They have to think, can I actually build this money market API, money movement hoopla? And they have to think about it. They go, oh, we've never done that before. That's hard. But getting to the, how do you measure that if you're not going to count hours? So what I always do is I bring people back to like some sort of a bread box, right? Because if people suck at estimating, they can do one thing really well, and it's comparing two things. Is an apple bigger than a strawberry? Yeah, obviously. How much bigger? I don't know, 5 or 6 times. Damn, it's good enough. And that's the point. And there's some really there's people that say some controversial things about estimating, which I love. They say any time spent estimating is wasted time because you could have been delivering value. And so you want to get good enough, close enough. And so relative estimating does that. You create your own apple and strawberry through the work. You go, what's the average piece of work that actually is, something that doesn't take very long. It's easily less than a week's worth of work. It's small enough that we could all understand it and have a conversation about it. Let's all agree that this is our 5-point user story. It's our apple, right? It's your anchor story. And then everything else gets compared to it. Like, well, is this bigger or smaller than that? Oh, it's much smaller. Okay, great. Well, so that's a 5. And this is a 1 or a 2. Great, close enough. Mark it down. Next one. Oh, we're trying to do this other thing. It's build a brand new feature. It's a whole customer inventory segment. Holy crap, that's way bigger than an apple. And it's actually too big for us to estimate. And that's the point. We go, okay, now that we need to put on the back burner for a little bit till we have time to actually break it down. Or maybe it's important enough and we need to break it down right now. So this idea of relative estimating, it goes back to like, I don't know, literally like Neanderthals. Is the saber-toothed tiger faster than the elephant? How do I escape and save my life? Like, we can do quick math in our head, comparing two things very quickly, but trying to say exactly how many pounds does a lion weigh, no one can do that.
Kind of going back to what you were saying about all that, it's not the estimate that's important either. It's all about the conversation. It starts the conversation around this thing. And really that's what we're talking about is, are you able to complete this goal? And that's kind of where I try to get teams to focus on, is being more goal oriented, because the goals are more important than the actual work behind them. If you complete some of the work, that's great. It's whatever is going to reach your goal. So that's really where relative estimation has its power, in that, okay, well, this is bigger than this. And well, as a team, you start thinking about what's your definition of done. Okay, you were talking about, all right, you're going to be able to complete it. It's according to a team's definition of done. So a lot of agile teams, the team is the one that sets the quality standards, and that's for a good reason. It's because, well, they're the ones that are actually asking in their mind, well, how are we going to test this so that we deliver value to the customer? And so it's kind of difficult to train a team to do estimating. And like you were saying, which I completely agree, humans in general suck at estimating. And it's just part of our nature. And so you said it was a 4 or a 5, and you said it was an 8. Well, why did you say it was a 5? Well, I said it was a 5 because I can develop it using this discombobulator and be able to put it through this binomial transcontinental railway, and hey, it'll be done.
Right.
But then someone who has the quality mindset, a tester or a QA person, is going to say, well, yeah, but I said it was an 8 because I have to test the login. I have to test being able to go to these 4 menu items because we're touching those
Yeah.
pieces of functionality. I have to be able to test it from right. So then that's becoming more complicated. And so that's what's more important is that conversation right there that's telling you, okay, now a product owner will then become aware of that and say, all right, I didn't realize that being able to develop it's kind of simple, but now it's testing all of this part of my system. And
Right.
okay, now I can make decisions of how much risk do I want to take to produce whatever value I
Yep.
think that this is going to deliver. So yeah, it's a relative term. So
Hopefully they're
but
documenting those acceptance criteria as they go, because the team is learning as they have that conversation.
right.
And if they decide to put it on the back burner, they want to make sure they don't forget those things till when they actually get working on it.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And it's all about that conversation, and being able to track that acceptance criteria is important because now we talked about this. I remember now. Okay. So
Yeah.
yeah. All right. I
Well,
get it.
sometimes those disagreements are in the details of the how. You're like, well,
Mhm.
I just thought we'd reuse that other thing we built, last month. And then the other guy goes, no, dude, it's totally different. You can't use that. We have to build this brand new because it's talking to a whole different thing. We've never done this before. Oh, I didn't realize that. And now all of a sudden they can get to a better common shared understanding. That's the phrase I like to
The
use all
shared
the time, right?
understanding is exactly the key. You all have a shared understanding of the work that needs to be done. So then I want to ask you this question, which some teams have asked me about. What then, if you have a good definition of done, you have a good measure of quality, what then is a definition of ready? Is there such a thing? Where do you
Mm.
put it?
That's a great question, and there are very wildly different opinions online. I think more mature teams will probably say you shouldn't have one. Most of the teams that I've worked with can benefit from at least writing it down, and some of it's just common sense. Like, definition of ready is it really important enough? Do we have a shared understanding? Have we actually talked about it? And do we know why we're doing this? Like if you don't know those basic things, then yeah, maybe you shouldn't do that thing yet.
Right. Yeah. So just basic understanding of some things. And sometimes the definition of ready moves. People say, okay, we're committed. It's ready when we're committed to start development. And
Mm,
so then as a scrum master, it's like, okay, that's setting off some alarm bells, but what does development mean? Does it mean proof of concept phase? Does it
right.
mean researching the architecture? What are you talking about here?
Well, a team might be
And-
working on any kind of, different types of work from different sort of timelines, right? So, and if your team has all the skills it needs to deliver, you probably have some research tasks or some spikes that are trying to inform something that you might do in the future. And you might be in the middle of delivering things that are just about done and ready to go to customer. And so there's things in different phases of sort of like the lifeline of work. And so I think it's like you said, it's kind of, it requires some intuition about what the individual thing is that's in question. Is it ready enough for UX research? Sure, we should actually do that because we need to find out if the customer even cares about this thing we're considering to do next month. But is it ready to work on? Well, yeah, we've built the first half of the API. We really should finish it this sprint so we can actually launch that feature.
right. It's whatever the goal is. It's
The
all
goal,
goal
right?
focused, right? It doesn't mean that's the only thing you work on, just the most important thing that you work on. I've actually worked with a lot of teams where they try to finish all the tasks for that sprint to sustain the goal, but that's all they work on. And talking about maturity, what you kind of touched on, I would argue that the best teams, the most mature teams that I've worked with, always, always, always have work in flight. All right. According to their workflow, going back to that
Mm,
cumulative CFD that you were talking about, they always have work in flight. And the work in flight is, well, that's the sprint goal determines the work that they have in flight because they're always producing value.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you could kind of touch on, maturity a little bit. You kind of alluded to it.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I think as a coach and as a scrum master, you might do different things with a team based on the team's level of maturity. But like, yeah, what does that mean? Like, how do you know how mature a team is? This is something that I've spent a lot of time with. In fact, I'm in the middle of writing a book on it, so it's like, thanks for throwing up the softball. Um, I'm drawn to a couple of models out there. There's a ton of different ways to measure maturity. I think what's most important though is that it's mindset focused, right? So you can imagine things like, what's the team culture? What are some of the topics there about Tuckman model type stuff? Is it forming, storming, norming? Do they actually work together? Are they still in silos? Do they have psychological safety? Are there dysfunctions on the team? Do they know how to solve their own problems and collaborate together? Do they care about learning? So it's those kinds of things when I talk about team culture. And there's obvious other things that are maybe a little bit more mechanical, although understanding your Scrum process or your Kanban process, there's maturity levels there. Kind of the Shuha type of a perspective about understanding why we do things. Like, you're not just repeating the same 3 questions at a stand up. So, whether or not you're estimating, whether you're counting things in hours versus actually understanding, goal oriented, relative estimating, shared understanding type stuff. There's degrees of maturity in all these different things. So agile process basics is like the second big picture thing. Product management is the other things, like, how does a team managing their backlog? Do they even know who their customer is? Do they have a vision? Do they know who their stakeholders are? Are they actually creating conversations around that to, do all voices count, to share information, to actually get the right work on the table for them to work on? And then the fourth bucket that I might describe is around the actual engineering or value delivery. So like, and these are like DORA metrics, right? Like, how quickly can the team push value into production? How quickly do they respond to problems in a release planning process? Do they actually focus on testing and quality about just the way that they operate as a team? Do they even have the right environments to be able to do the different kinds of testing that their work requires? And are they actually working on sharing skills and just in terms, manage their source control properly? There's so many different ways that you could measure maturity, but that's kind of like a quick glimpse at some of the things that I've been focused on, and just trying to help teams think through, what should we be doing next?
I really appreciate you sharing that insight of your maturity model, and using the different popular models that are out there right now to measure maturity. One thing that, if I could touch on it, one thing that I've seen some maturity models where they failed is they really don't measure a team or organization's ability to continuously improve.
Yeah.
And I think you and I will agree that when it comes to agility, the one thing that you really need to work on as a team, as an organization, in order to mature, is to be able to continuously improve. Has your model addressed anything related to continuous improvement and how to
Yeah,
measure it?
100%. Yeah, in terms of like your agile process basics, are you using metrics properly? Do you even have a culture that focuses on, and it's really not just, continuous improvement is the right buzzword, but I think if you really break it down, it's, how do you feel about failure, right? It's like, what's the culture of, do you avoid retros, or are you eager to get better at things? Do you treat your user stories like they're hypotheses instead of, requirements? And just being data driven, like some of the things we talked about before. So yeah, absolutely, the kind of the big picture aspects, everything related to the agile mindset has to be incorporated in there. And it's like, I've built a model. There's literally 24 different questions I might ask a team, with 4 different example behaviors inside of each. So it's 96 data points, but really in 24 simple questions. Covers the whole gamut of things that would answer the question of, any aspect of, has the team achieved some level of maturity in the way that they work and the way that they think with an agile mindset. But you wouldn't have to use mine. I've seen plenty of clients of mine in the past sort of invent their own. And I don't know that that's a horrible thing, so long as it's not quite so prescriptive as it is being mindset focused. I think that's really the gist of it, is like, agile is not a new set of rules. You don't get brownie points just because you kept your sprint your stand-ups less than 15 minutes. Like, that's not maturity. Maturity is understanding why you actually have the meeting in the first place, and you've found ways to collaborate to get work done sooner that's meaningful for your customers.
Right. Good.
So I am still working on this thing. The working title is a little bit, I don't know, maybe it's cheesy, maketeamsawesome.com. So that's where I'm collecting email addresses for anyone who's interested in the work as it progresses. Maketeamsawesome.com.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you for that address. Thank you for your assessment of your maturity model. I hope it serves teams well. All right.
Happy to answer questions about it too, if anyone really wanted to follow up and get into it. I think the just one other point about that, generically, why do you even have maturity model, right? Because anytime you put measures and scores out there, the leaders in organization are going to want to compare and contrast, and who's better and all that kind of stuff. I'm adamant about making sure that maturity models are a tool for a team to use internally, right? It's about their own learning journey. It's about them figuring out, where do we need to focus in order for us to become better as a collective team. And as a coach, you're the facilitator of that conversation. And as they objectively look at the sort of spectrum of 24 questions or whatever you might use, they should collectively go, oh yeah, we are still struggling with our ability to, deploy value more quickly to customers. Great. As a coach, you want them to self-select where they want to improve. And then you want to be the one who offers potential solutions or ideas to coach them to get better at those things they want to improve in.
Awesome. That's great. Well, I think that's all the time we have for our podcast today. Be sure you tune into us next time when we're going to be fielding some more questions from our coaching efforts. Until then, my name is John Riley.
Brian Link, thanks for talking to us, folks.
Thank you.